We are rolling into tax season. April 8th here, another off the record on the rocks with my good friend, Mr. Ancarino Lara. It's a wild time in the market right now. We've got Trump talking tariffs. We've got just complete fear in the markets, sell-off, whiplash. You're starting to hear some of this narrative around the decoupling of Bitcoin. I've seen those headlines starting to pop. People really tracking the micro trends of the S&P 500. I saw Larry Fink out there saying that we're, quote, a little worried about the U.S. equities. And then my prediction starting to come true. Elon Musk says that Trump's tariff advisor is, quote, dumber than a sack of bricks amid all of this FUD in the marketplace. Tell me what's good. What are the vibes from your side?
I mean, the vibes from our side, the California side, all the things that you just said, playing out in this bizarre dance, this global economic dance, tariffs out of one side of the mouth against every country in the world, even countries that don't exist, from what I've heard. Out of the other side of the mouth is, but we need to buy this thing called TikTok from China. But then out of the other side of the mouth, but wait, didn't we just put a tariff on things that we buy from China? Or it's like there are these circles logic that don't add up to me. And I'll say it. You called it, and then the Musk and the Trump and stuff we can unpack. But we called it last episode last week. Is if you have 15 million different tariff line items on a spreadsheet, well, you better get a Web3 AI company to make some sense of it, to know what it is you can and can't do.
Grab a drink. It's time for another episode of Off the Record on the Rocks. Join Michael Toner and Ancarino Lara as we discuss the latest in all things Web3, AI, metaverse, and crypto. Tune out the noise and turn up the signal as we pour ourselves into the future. Better make mine a double. I
mean, we're splitting hairs in ways that I'm not even sure anyone even thought possible. So I'm excited. It's a wild week.
It is a wild week. It's really, really hard. Again, just the backdrop of this tariff news, and over the weekend, the optics, even the optics of Trump going to play golf while there's blood in the streets, and the stock market dropping trillions of dollars in a single day, the single biggest drop in the stock market. And you hear all this stuff, you try to make sense of it, and for somebody to be so calm, cool, and collected out on the golf course makes me think the fix is already in, that somebody already is feeling confident that you could basically be getting a discount on stocks, equities, ETFs, and crypto. Buy whatever you like now. But that narrative then starts to come into question when you are seeing some breaks from the Republican Party, folks saying, they're going to put some stops, that the Senate wants to vote to approve these tariffs. Yes, there were fake countries like Antarctica, putting tariffs on the penguins. And you're like, wait a second, this literally is like AI hallucination when it comes to tariffs. Like Grok didn't think through the training data enough to know that there are no exports from this country. It was just an if this, then that statement when it came to the AI across the board, 10%, 15%. This looks like it's coming in. This looks like it's coming out. And it messed up. And it's like very blatantly obvious that that's what's going on. And here you've got world leaders now picking up the phone. I know Netanyahu, the first one to show up at the White House, knocking on the door, glad handing to make a deal, right? The art of the deal. You've called this for years now, putting things on the table, taking things off the table, putting things on the table, taking things off the table for the benefit of the final negotiation. And that to me is where, when Larry Fink is out there today saying we're starting to get a little bit worried about U.S. equities, I mean, yeah, I would be too. The banks themselves are staring down an existential threat. That is where I'm at. That is why I believe Larry Fink is out there talking about Bitcoin, talking about the need for crypto and ETFs, and trying to pump these things through the system, because without them, we don't need the banks.
Yeah, I mean, to build off that line of thought, as we play back some of the conversations that we had, dumber than a sack of bricks line that you opened with, to me, just rings. It's like the exact same sound cadence of the old, everyone from Mark Cuban, who called, remember, Bitcoin, just, I'd rather have a bunch of bananas than Bitcoin. These sort of, these elaborate and, amplified exaggerations of things to make a point. When the head of the World Bank, whose name is escaping me right now, but the head of the World Bank said that it's just a basket of junk. You're a sack of bricks. Just these simple 3-line things. It just smacks and reminds me of exactly what was happening almost a year ago. We can go back and pull the transcripts, but Larry Fink, who is the CEO of BlackRock, for our listeners, just to remind you, he is one of the first who came out from the traditional banking sector and aligned himself with cryptocurrency. Remember famously saying, this is digital gold. Like what would motivate someone who has the most money under management in the world, the trillions of dollars that we hear about under management? Well, if you already know last year at this time that Trump was going to take a second term, and you already know exactly how that's going to start to go, then you would want to start laying groundwork for every derivative that you can so that a traditional bank or traditional banking entity like BlackRock can stay way ahead of the headwinds of the curve, which is, well, if we are going to go down a road and even start talking about a digital Bitcoin reserve for this country, then we, BlackRock, better control every derivative market off of all these new things. So to me, it just shows why so aggressively they came in as high and as hard as they did to the SEC at that time and just bullied their way into position. Because for him to say that he's getting concerned about these, what was it, the American equities?
U.S. equities.
The
right?
U.S. equities. For him to say that to me was, okay, a year ago, he said that Bitcoin was digital gold. And now where we are a year ahead, now they have hundreds of millions of dollars of inflows and outflows into all kinds of nonsense ETFs, from Bitcoin to Ethereum to Solana to who knows what else. So if he's saying that right now, U.S. equities, he's quote concerned about, let's put a little pin in this one and look at this 1 year from now and see exactly what it was he was signaling. Because clearly this individual in this company has a lot of influence over how the government runs.
I mean, I am trying to quickly read this this headline. This is from Reuters. This is from Tatiana Balzer and Ross Kerber. BlackRock's Fink says stocks could extend fall by 20% amid U.S. recession worries. So you're hearing this talk about the recessions. Most CEOs, quote, most CEOs I talk to would say we are probably in a recession right now. Interesting. That's crazy. That's from yesterday. I had not seen that headline.
Remember, buy the rumor, sell the news. When Jamie Dimon comes out and says that Bitcoin is used for human trafficking, we always say, why would he do that? His company, JP Morgan, offers a spot Bitcoin ETF. Why would he say that? Because he wants to give a discount to his pals. Why does BlackRock come out and start saying, well, I already think we're in a recession? Because then people start saying, oh, should I be buying the dip? Like, is this a little mini dip? I mean, what's him speaking like that isn't designed for some massive sell-off and run on banks. Like you said, there are people playing golf.
Yeah.
And then you have Fink making these little like tweet-like messages to sway markets further. I mean, today I heard we're rebounding all of a sudden. I mean, everyone's talking about how exciting it was that they rebounded 8% or whatever this morning.
I also think we have to take into consideration a couple of things. One, buy in May and go away. We're not quite there yet. It's also staring down the week till tax day. So anybody who's already completed 2024 filings sort of already knows where they're financially standing, whether they owe the IRS or not. They might be sitting on a pile of cash like Mr. Buffett, who now is looking like the ultimate prophet, sitting on a pile of cash, just waiting, buying time, waiting. And here you are with all this fear, uncertainty, and doubt in the market. If you're sitting on a pile of cash, now would be the perfect time to buy. And I will go to a Bitcoinist article. So switching gears a little bit, but this is saying Bitcoin whales, massive buying pushes and the accumulation trend score to near perfection amid market dip. Basically, they're calculating anyone who has over 10,000 Bitcoin in their wallets and what their accumulation strategies are looking like, that whales effectively buying more at a discount. So when you dig in and you really look at the on-chain data and you see what people are buying, yeah, you can get stocks, bonds, maybe even Tesla on a real steep discount right now.
Yeah, I mean, not sometimes financial advice, but right now is a time where everyone is making purchases. I myself just had to buy a couple of bags. And why is it that the markets don't respond to what would be normally money flooding into the markets? We're seeing a lot of sideways movement, right? The inflows and the outflows from these ETFs are massive, but no one's taking 100 million from an Ethereum spot ETF and buying stocks right now. Like they're just sort of moving in and out of these markets. And, look, like you said, when we talked about it before, the ability for these guys to speak and then have the markets move as dramatically as they do, goes to show that, yeah, they are all loading up, the whales and the big companies. I was waiting for Saylor's next update for how many Bitcoin he's accumulated in the month of April. It's going to be massive.
Another quote that stuck out to me, and it is funny how I sort of like piece these little quotes together, but this is from Trump today, saying basically that he no longer wants Wall Street to control the economy. Whatever the quote was, let me see if I can find it directly, but there's a lot wrapped up in that. If you've got the president saying out there, we're no longer going to let Wall Street control the economy. Well, it's like, well, how are you managing that? Well, you're managing the news cycle. Then if you're the president and you're feeding it to Wall Street, AKA Larry Fink, the world's largest asset holder, they know the plan. They know the roadmap. They may know the buy in May and go away. Again, like whatever that timing is, whatever is going to happen. And as you're seeing now, Elon put the gasoline on the fire, calling him dumber than a sack of bricks for implementing these tariffs. Well, what's happening behind closed doors? Deals are getting made. Money is flowing. Handshakes are being made, jobs are going to start moving, products are going to start moving. It's the question I sort of led with here is, how much of it is in control? If it's not Wall Street controlling the markets, then you would assume that it is government in this point, or at least the government narrative, this tariff narrative that is controlling the markets right now. Well, how much can that get away from these guys, from Elon, from Trump, from the Peter Thiels, from the and Andreessen Horowitz, the big smart money that's not Wall Street, right? The private equity money. How could this narrative get away from them? And could you enter sort of beyond the recession? Like, could you swing the pendulum too far? Could you introduce too much fear and uncertainty and doubt into the market? I'm just playing devil's advocate a little bit of, it feels like it's under control. Like when I really zoom back, I'm not saying that people aren't hurting. I think people are losing jobs. I always go there on the show of like, at the end of the day, people are absolutely going to, they're paying more for things. Inflation is real. Job loss is real. But as the economy is sort of being rebuilt, it feels like it's under control. It feels like US from a global standpoint is going to emerge victorious and leading the path on AI and blockchain technology. And that to me is the path to America maintaining a position of power on the global stage. I mean, I just went to a real heady spot there. But.
Well, no, I like it, but it also calls into question, I think, something that we've explored, and I would say more tacitly than for real. But, there's all these old economic terms Let's just say, I'll say it like that. There's a lot of antiquated terms, right? And in general, in the way that everyone speaks and has in the last 5 years about the way that taxation would occur, for these new emerging economies. Like if we just said the umbrella in the last 5 years when everything started really heating up of crypto generally. And that umbrella covered everything from Bitcoin in one big column to Ethereum and all the other coins and tokens in another big column to the DeFi protocols that are something that haven't really even been spoken about in a long time to the NFT and the tokenization and the fractionalization of ownership to the metaverse or whatever it is that we are currently thinking the metaverse is, whether it's walking down the halls of former Twitter X or it's actually putting on some kind of augmented goggle situation and exploring this way. There's all these things that exist in what you might call a new economy, a new world. It's a new everything. But what do we do as American regulators and American politicians and elected and appointed officials? We go backwards to our old magic books and we dust it off and say, okay, wait a second. There's this thing in here called the Howey test. I think this should be a good, benchmark for these things that are almost 100 years out of step with this notion of a securities example as one. Or two, to say, well, there are these words. Like, what are the words? Well, there's a word called depression. Well, what does that mean? Well, if it has a capital D, it means your kid can't go to school today. Sorry, that's a bad joke. But if it has a D in a book, it means, oh, it was that time we read this thing. It was called the Grapes of Wrath. There were people traveling and they were broke and everyone had to buy bread with wheelbarrows of money. Depression sounds bad. It's this old thing that's bad. There's this thing called recession, which is maybe a little more current. And that, we can all talk about old Slick Willie Clinton and like coming out of recession or whatever it was and what that means. And yet we have this notion that all of it is tied together, that we say, like Mr. Fink says, oh, well, I think we might, I'm getting worried about, but he very specifically says American equities. That's what he's worried about. He doesn't say I'm worried about the American economy. He doesn't say I'm worried about the cryptocurrency or the fiat dollar or the gold or the investment in treasuries. He doesn't get that specific because is there a scenario? This is my question, devil's advocate. Is there a scenario where one of the economies goes into a recession, but the other economy goes into just an absolute boom? And is there a scenario where, as if we believe money is moving, quote, sideways back and forth between, call it our new digital and our old fiat economies, then are those two things at sort of an inverse relationship at all times? Or can they both boom? Because if you're draining one to fill the other, aren't you constantly just playing a game of bucket of water going up the treehouse? And we're still starving of thirst.
I just think I need to understand more from an economic perspective what this idea of decoupling means and sounds like. And we talked a little bit last episode about these kind of fiefdoms and territorial fiefdoms and individual states creating ETFs.
Stock markets.
Yeah, stock markets. And I've said this for years too, that new markets will be created. And I think that's a really, really tangible example of literally a new market, the state. GDP, the gross output from the state of Texas being put up for a futures commodity. You can bet on it. You can bet on Texas without you having to live there, right? Like through the US stock market. And so maybe equities are different. They're not derivative products. Again, I like that you're thinking through that. But yeah, this means that on a global stage, if Bitcoin is a global store reserve, then it does seem to like weigh the other side of all the other baskets of currencies. And we have talked about this too, of like, there's US dollars, there's Canadian dollars, there's Mexican dollars, there's the euro, there's all kinds of money, but there's only one Bitcoin and it's a global currency. And yeah, if it does decouple and cryptocurrency begins to decouple, do that one basket of goods, the Solanas, the US made cryptocurrencies now the digital currencies then sit beside the traditional? I don't know, but I think there's economic value in understanding, is that even possible? Is that where markets are going?
Yeah, that's what that question is sort of I'm asking. But now that you've said what you said, I'm starting to think through too that the choice of words, we know with all administrations, this current and the previous ones across the boards, right? The choice of words are the most important things that these folks can do, the way that they articulate what it is that they're saying, because it gets interpreted and misinterpreted by many different people. So Fink saying specifically American equities, like you said, excludes all derivatives, which is an interesting flavor of ice cream that he happens to sell, right? Even with the president saying, I don't want the economy to be run by Wall Street. Well, what does that mean? Is that actually mean 4 or 5 people who he may not like, who happen to be at banks on Wall Street, that they know that he's referring to them? Is that Jamie Dimon? Is that Fink? Or is it New York and Wall Street in a literal sense? Because if you say, well, I don't want Wall Street, aka the federal hub of our national stock market, to run things, then maybe you do want the great state of Texas. And we all know the president loves the great state of Florida. And if you're someone who's betting, you better have picked Florida over Houston last night. But maybe there is a Florida stock exchange. And because if Texas leads the way, and then suddenly it's like, well, actually, the Florida, California, and Texas stock exchange are going to be the ones that run the economy. Now, we can go back to when I had come out of the movie theater after seeing the movie Civil War. Let's not forget the narrative of the movie Civil War is that the economies and militias of California, Texas, and Florida march on and ultimately depose the president in that fictional narrative, right? There's this sense that there are 3 really strong economies in this country. But yet there's this thing called Wall Street that runs the country. So you can already see maybe this fractionalization of ownership, but not at the tokenized NFT digital asset level. But how about we're fractionalizing ownership of the American economy? Because maybe all these states' economies aren't created equal. And we need to actually create a diversification of assets. Why do we hold them all in New York? Let's put them all over. I mean, I think we're seeing, well, you just kind of opened my mind to it a little. I think we're seeing these pieces falling into place. Yeah. Like every kid has a puzzle that they grew up with, which is a little state puzzle where you get to put all the states in and you kind of know where they are. I feel like there's a puzzle sitting on someone's desk in Washington and they're starting to put pieces in place and say, okay, what's here? What's here? What's here? What's here? Boom, boom, boom. Let's create new state economies.
Right. There were 13 colonies and then those, and you had to bring in all 50 of them and then Alaska and Hawaii and now maybe Greenland, like think about
red, white, and blue land, pal. Okay. Be careful how you refer to it.
But I'm making light of it, but it's in the headlines. And here we are piecing through all that noise, trying to define what these legacy terms mean, putting them into new Web3 digital ownership context. And when you start to put the American economy on chain, and now you can fractionalize it by state gross domestic product within each individual state, now Social Security money outflows, HHS outflows from the federal government, the balancing of this budget, the way the money flows to roads. We've talked about all of this. And now you could put up proposals, and vote on them. And your voice as a human actually is going to matter based on the contribution of your own taxes and where you live and what the budget is in your state. You can now run things more efficiently, which, it takes us back down to a Doge timeline or a Doge narrative. But I like the way we're piecing all this together. I think that this concept of individual states, individual counties, individual schools, districts, governments, and down to the self-sovereign individual, you and I, having custody over both our digital and our physical assets and making sure that there's a one-to-one comparison between the two, or derivative markets that are publicly available. I'm going to need to really think through this. The other piece about the decoupling is that at some point, Bitcoin in and of itself, you would assume starts to act like its own asset class, that it doesn't make sense logically why it would trade in correlation to the S&P 500. Why has it traditionally mimicked the US stock market when it is a global currency reserve? I mean, take that of if we're having tariffs and we're going back and forth and China's out this and Antarctica owes us this as an example, and Europe owes us this and Israel owes us that. Well, we're going to put all that on chain. We're going to be able to keep track of it. We're going to be able to know who owes us what and when in real time. And now we can run a very, very efficient global economy. I mean,
yeah, well, if a flip side of that, and as what we're looking at, I mean, it really is right now. It's optics, and it's a narrative of pushing news cycles. It's a narrative of that to call back something we talked about. This is not going back years, but if you remember, there was a period of time for AI, for Web3 development, for various things, and just sort of the pure tech side of it, as opposed to like the cryptocurrency or even the economic side of it, is that people, companies, and organizations that are in the news constantly, we kind of have this supposition, which is they seem to be the ones who aren't doing the real work. Like their work is coming from a PR initiative, and the companies that were very obviously, or conspicuously, we should say, silent and not really saying much, seem like they are making the real moves. And if we're moving on the one hand to a place where there's a digital reserve of Bitcoin, that's people say in one side of their mouth talking about how it could replace the Federal Reserve or augment it. Well, yeah, that squarely puts this notion of a Bitcoin digital reserve in the American context, but people forget it is not an American currency. It's a global currency. So what else does the reserve have? Is it just cash? I mean, or is there gold, bonds, securities, other things? I mean, if the Federal Reserve is powered by 7, 8, 9 families, then I think the answer is there's a whole lot of stuff in it. It might be even the closest thing to our sovereign wealth fund that we have, right? A bunch of independent families who just have assets, who lend money on schedules that they determine to the United States government. So something that popped up, and this is something that you and I actually haven't talked about, so I'm excited to get your take on it, is there hasn't been a ton of conversation about stable coins in the press, right? Which is interesting, because there was a period of time when all we heard about, this goes back a year, previous administration was all over this. There was the CBDCs. It was an acronym everyone was talking. The central bank digital currencies. There were stable coins. Well, what's a stable coin? Well, obviously, if you have an American dollar, you need this thing called USDC, which is the digital twin of the dollar. And then digital twins became the thing everyone talked about. I have me and my avatar, all these things getting confused, whatever. So who's quiet through all of it? Tether. Tether is very quietly amassing a war chest. And the war chest that they're amassing is exposure and holding to United States Treasury bonds. Okay. So now think about that. They moved in the last buy, they've moved up, passing the country of Germany, of having more money. The number is $113 billion in direct and indirect treasury holdings, because Tether are basically angling and saying, you guys can play your new economy, your old economy games, but it's all going to have to come back to a 1-to-1, and we're the 1-to-1. And how can you trust us? We hold more American treasury bonds than most of your allied countries. Think about that for just 1 second. How in the world has Tether been able to do that quietly? They've got a new CFO. They brought a new CFO who has 20 years experience in normal traditional banks. They're doing all those things that we saw the Coinbases do, the Metas do. They start hiring guys from the SEC, hiring guys from traditional banks, hiring guys who've gone through audits from the most aggressive administrations in the world, and are now just not even waving their hand, just sort of quietly buying billions of dollars of United States treasuries, proving that they're more American than than Bitcoin, certainly, but more American than probably any Andreessen Horowitz project. That to me, to explain that. So now it's like they're trying to pull it back. I hate to use the word, but tether the digital dollar to the fiat dollar. No one else is saying it or doing it.
I think I have seen Circle and Ripple and XRP continuing to stay in the chat. They're a big player in that stablecoin market. I think you're right. I think that there is a quiet through line to pay attention to, and one that we cannot take our finger off the pulse, which are stablecoins. Because in the talk, I get all excited about the decentralized nature of it, and we just talked through 20 minutes of decentralizing the entire U.S. economy. And at some level, you may be right that it's going to come back around to a one-to-one digital twin with none other than the U.S. digital currency. I think it also plays nicely into a couple headlines I know we didn't get to, but the Justice Department pulling back on the cryptocurrency investigations. So all of those companies, from Tether to Ripple to Coinbase, you name any of them and all of them that were operating here in the US, I think a lot of that amassing of either crypto reserves or, if you were going to go buy treasuries and then out the other side sell a digital currency, you were probably going to get investigated by the Justice Department and put under SEC investigation and have your assets frozen. And now all of a sudden that narrative, Trump saying just in the past 24 hours, this is Justice Department, this is from April 8th. The DOJ won't pursue cases it feels are better left to financial regulators, focusing instead on crimes committed with cryptocurrency like drugs and trafficking. But what it means to me is that any of the banking related stuff, they're being instructed to stand down and let these guys operate. And I think you're right on there to say that that's got huge implications for the stablecoin markets, the issuers of those stablecoins. And then the other one about CZ going to Pakistan and becoming a special envoy. This is CZ from Binance in the I always think of them as the Coinbase in the UK. They're the equivalent they've been blessed as this cryptocurrency exchange. And now you got CZ going to Pakistan. I don't know where to make of that in what we were just talking about, other than, could other countries invest in the U.S. Sovereign Wealth Fund? Could the U.S. Sovereign Wealth Fund be not just this combination of cryptocurrencies, but maybe there's a whole nother level of it where the Sovereign Wealth Fund now all of a sudden has or backed by a digital currency? I don't know. Again, I need to think through some of this of how that would even work. But I think,
it's really confusing and I think it's by design. Again, the splitting of hairs and how you say things, the optics of what it is you're doing and how casually you appear, the quiet amassing of war chests that are across the boards and by definition diversified, just because there are now so many things that you can invest in. And honestly, these bankers, if they have sitting on a pile of cash, like if Warren Buffett sitting on a pile of cash, he has what? I mean, it's a myriad choices of where you could put, that investment. And if you don't like any of them, you probably could call someone that you know in banking and they could create a derivative just for you. Because if it doesn't exist what you want to invest in, then they'll create it if you have enough money. It's like walking into a casino and you're like, hey, can you open up that baccarat table? They're like, you got 8 players? And you're like, yeah.
Sure.
And they're like, okay, we'll open it up.
Here was the statement. I was trying to find this. This is from David Sachs, who's kind of the appointed crypto czar. This was on the statement on stable coins. The SEC has determined that fully reserved, liquid, dollar-backed stable coins are not securities. Therefore, blockchain transactions to mint or redeem them do not need to be registered under the Securities Act. Helpful clarity from SEC Gov. Thanks, David. That was from April 4th. That was after we recorded our last episode, and we caught a couple of these headlines. There was some TikTok news, and then there was this statement from the Division of Corporate Finance, this statement on stablecoins. So blockchain transactions to mint or redeem stablecoins. So imagine you're Warren Buffett, and you're sitting on a pile of cash, and we need to clear out we don't actually have the dollar bills. We don't actually have the paper money. And we're not going to make it a securities act if you just want to trade them in, quote unquote, redeem them, go ahead and mint some USDC. We know we got the buyer. What if Tether and Buffett came out and Buffett ends up going all in and say, yeah, I don't believe in cryptocurrency. I've always said I don't believe in Bitcoin, but never bet against America.
Yeah.
Never bet against the US dollar. And now I've got the biggest holding of USDC on chain.
I mean, and in what you just described to me sounds like, and maybe it's always been this obvious, but if that is true as of 4 days ago, today's the 8th of April recording, then what that says is you could have millions and millions of dollars equivalent of, you pick it, Solana, Pepe, Bitcoin. But you could be small, medium, or large versions. And then you say, I'd like to withdraw $1 million. Well, you can withdraw $1 million, but you're going to convert it into USDC or Tether first. And then there's zero tax exposure and zero issue with the SEC because you didn't do anything into American dollars. You just did it into the digital twin. And to me, it feels like, again, it's a nice way to create perfect. It's not even on ramps and off ramps anymore. It's just like, how do we get on this freeway and go as fast as we can and never ever run out of gas or electricity? It's just find a way to move the money into a new format, getting back to the why and the how, right? We all know why.
Money is liquid.
We all know why they're doing it, but the how, gosh, if you find the right path of the how, then you don't lose any of your value. You actually retain your value. And if you're able to move things across to different types of positions and never actually create a taxable event because you're technically never off ramping it, then that to me that's what Warren Buffett's looking for, right? How do you create real world value with fiat cash, but actually in a way that is outside of the purview of the American government? It's a global casino. It's not an American casino, right? So you have to figure out all these weird rules. To me, as you say that, it makes so much sense to me. He's waiting. Warren Buffett is waiting. Why? He just wants articles to hit one after the other between now and May that are saying no more SEC this, deregulation of this, stablecoins can do this. All the things are falling into place. So he's like, well, I happen to have this huge amount of money, this big tranche. These guys love using the word tranche. And we're just going to go boom. And what? I just fabricated that much value.
Or does he buy treasuries? Does he then go and say, I've got more treasuries than Tether? Now we've got the Buffett stable coin. I mean, there's something there. I saw the GameStop amassing their own Bitcoin, war chest. You think about, he's got a war chest of US dollars. We're talking about speculating. Could he be putting that into digital currency? I think it is this sideways movement of everyone's getting their positions. Everyone's getting in place for May. Now's the time to buy. Everything's on sale. And then what? Now all these deals get made. America jobs start booming. Does manufacturing come back? Does the economy start to roar for the next 4 years? Does Solana go through the roof? Does Tesla get back its equity value? I don't know.
I mean, you're talking about roaring, the economy roaring kitty. You got all these things that are starting to collide. Another thing I hadn't run by you, but I'll leave you with this one, is we've always wondered what would be the reason why Bitcoin or cryptocurrency ultimately becomes mainstream. We know, well, you got to get to the kids, right? What are the kids doing? There are these fits and starts with, gaming type of applications. We always say, well, what's it going to be? Like every new market, it's either pornography or it's gaming or it's gambling or some, combination of those things are what drive people to really care. Right. And okay, for kids, well, let's not use porn. For kids, gaming, okay, maybe, but everything on their phone's a game. What will it really drive it? So there's a game that's available now called Ember. Like there is an Ember coming off of the fireplace. And Ember is a game where when you sign up, they give you some free Satoshis. And then they let you wager them by putting, say, 10 Satoshis versus the outcome of the Florida-Houston basketball game. Or maybe it's 10 Satoshis to see if you can solve a weird little puzzle in under 20 seconds. Or maybe it's just a bunch of gamified meets gambling. And I will tell you, every kid that I know knows what it is. And now everyone, I'm talking 10-year-olds who I come up to who are friends of some of my kids in the street who say things like, how many sats did you bet on the Lakers last night? And that's out of a 10-year-old's mouth. And as soon as I heard that, and as a kid I hadn't even met, I'm like, oh my gosh, do you know what a sat stands for? Yeah, Satoshi. I have this many in my wallet. And I was like, oh, it's happening. It was the combination of gaming and gambling. And I'm not saying it's good. Believe me, I really don't like it when a bunch of fifth graders are talking about gambling on sports, which has got to be one of the number one problems for like poor college kids in the US, not doing their homework and just betting on games and driving their parents' credit cards into the ground. But sometimes awareness comes from the strangest of places. So if you haven't heard about it in your world, it's coming soon. It's meme-ish enough. And they're saying sats. I'm wagering my sats.
Interesting.
I think we're only one step away from the understanding that there are many more forms of dollars and value in this economy. And as soon as the kids start doing it, that just signals to me, hey, this is the future.
We just talked about real world money. You just talked about cryptocurrency inside of a gaming environment. And then there's crypto or gaming currency inside of something like Roblox. Yeah. Robux, which is a publicly traded company on the New York Stock Exchange. So now you could effectively be buying into a digital currency by buying it on the NYSE, or you could go and buy Satoshis and bring them into Ember World. I mean, I think that is a very good statement about what is happening in the market, in that money is now liquid. If we talk about content is liquid, games are liquid, AI bringing all of this to life, allowing you to move your assets in between the physical world and the real world, whether that's money or clothing or any other object that you may want to buy or purchase that you believe has value associated with it. I have not gone to see the Roblox movie, but I know my kids are going to want to see it. I do want to hear your hot take while we're still rolling.
The Minecraft movie, but I like that you said the Roblox movie because it's one and the same. But no, go see the Minecraft movie. It's really it treats video games, it treats 80s arcade culture with such reverence and such respect, which the parents will love. And of course, it treats Minecraft and every meme you could think of that's happening with also great respect. But the thing that's the underlying message is, hey, if you're so good at being creative in this virtual space that happens to be called the overworld, or maybe you go underground to the netherworld, however they call it in Minecraft. And the big message is that how about you go through this magical portal back to the real world and be creative in a way that benefits you, your friends, and your family. And then just a beat and a full stop and literally parents in the back of the theater going, yeah, like for the first time, because it's a message that actually sort of serves the greater good. Anyway, not financial advice, but go check out Minecraft movie.
I think that's a great place to leave it. Go do something creative in the real world. We'll leave it there. I'm on spring break next week, so we'll skip a week and we'll be back mid to late April. We'll do it again.
Hey, don't sleep on this Saturday. Coachella in the desert in California. I'm sure there'll be some politicalnesses around that. And this Saturday at Coachella, it's a full moon. That is both non and financial advice at the same time.
All right, we'll do it again. Peace.
All right, later.
That's all the time we have for this episode of Off the Record, On the Rocks. You don't have to go home, but you can't stay here. See you next time for more news and all things crypto and Web3.